as a storyteller, I think you have to get past what's the first line, the first basic story, what's behind that story, and how can you make something cool out of it.
All right, welcome to How's Your Wine. This is our episode tonight featuring Sedale McCall. Sedale, thanks for connecting with us, and go ahead and introduce yourself to everyone tonight.
Yeah, happy to. Thank you first, Nelson, for having me. Sedale, I am based here in Northern Virginia, which is wine country on the East Coast. I actually am most people, if you know me on Instagram at Untoldwinestores, where I'm really focusing on telling stories that I think need to be told more. So that focuses on Black-owned wine writers, or winemakers rather, Hispanic-owned winemakers, Native-owned. I've kind of crossed the gamut. I had a veteran wine not too long ago, so really focusing on all of that. But this year, got into wine writing. So I'm a contributor for the Vintner Project, also working with Uncorked and Cultured. So yeah, just trying to tell as many cool wine stories as I can.
That's awesome. And for your day-to-day, you mentioned that you were a researcher, correct?
Yeah, so I'm, as I mentioned, in Northern Virginia, and so I work as a digital researcher for a bunch of big companies in DC that are trying to understand politics, public affairs, kind of figure out how Washington works, basically.
Right. And how long have you been in the DC area, Northern Virginia area?
Oh man, probably 10 years or so now. It would have been about 10 years. Gosh. It's been a while.
The political landscape has been like completely different from when you moved in. 2012 you had Obama, then you had 2016 you had Trump, and then now you have Biden. Like, how has that impacted your not only your professional life but your personal life being out there?
In so many ways. I started, like you mentioned, I started during Obama's second term. I was in Arlington, and same thing, working in PR, working in communications. In 2016, I actually was at a nonprofit helping some government agencies in the healthcare space, specifically around some HIV campaigns. And obviously, November 2016 happens, January 2017 happens. And so we're going through it at that point. The administration, most people know, the administration rolled back several programs specifically around healthcare, basically gutted most of HHS. And this is all stuff you can look up. And so, it's tough. It's tough. People, especially our communities, the ones we were serving, were nervous. They're scared of, if you think about HIV, there's a whole component around the LGBT community who obviously were very concerned and nervous about what was happening here in DC, and then the people that represented the agencies we worked with. So it was a tough few years. Even now, I think we're starting to get back into something more normal, but it was a tough few years, I think.
Man, and with today, it's we're recording in August of 2022. Like, how has your job changed over the last 2 years, especially with COVID? We're still battling COVID, obviously. How has that impacted your career?
Yeah. I mean, one, I think when you don't have a commute, it's a lot easier. And I will talk about the wine stuff. That's essentially how I had the time to get into this wine thing. But I would say, for our clients, not only the pandemic, but then you have George Floyd's murder, and you have this kind of racial reckoning. And now we've got, other health concerns that are coming out from the pandemic. I think it's really forcing people to think about what they stand for. And, our clients really have to take a stand on some issues, and we're helping them try to figure out what that means. What does it mean to weigh in on these things? And so there's a lot more research to be done, which, is a little bit job security on my side. But it's definitely changed what we're looking into for people.
For sure. And you mentioned now that are you working remote, or is that like your normal vibe now?
Yeah, I'm at home. Just had a son in April, so really been hanging out at home for the past several months. The office is some people are coming to the office, but for the most part, we're at home.
So knowing that you are working from home now, you have really no commute for your job. How did you start getting into wine?
Yeah, I think like everybody, when you're at home, there's not a lot to do. You start drinking a little bit more, and for me, it started as beer, kind of morphed into wine, and after a while, started just looking at other people, started seeing stuff on Instagram. I had a friend that's a distributor in Richmond, and so just started to realize how much there was to know about wine, which is really interesting to me. I love learning stuff. I love knowing about stuff. That's why I do research for a living. And so discovered, a couple of things. The Wine Folly book, if people don't know about that, it's an amazing book. And then started learning about exams and the ability to get certified in wine. And so started down that path. And if I know you've been into this wine thing for a little bit. Like once you start, there's a whole long journey you can go down. You can do wine forever. So now I'm in it.
Totally understand. So you mentioned you have a wife. You said.
Mm-hmm.
And so, how did y'all have like a deeper connection around wine that now you were at home? She may have been at home as well.
Yeah, I mean she's more tasting than studying it the way I am. But yeah, I mean we started by going to wineries, a while ago in this area. Got the chance to go to Napa a few years ago, and so she's familiar with it. And then now that I'm into it, she'll ask, okay, I want to try some wine. Like, show me what we should try today.
Yeah,
And so that's been a lot of fun.
that's awesome. So for you, what does it feel like when you're done with your day? You may have already had maybe a glass. I'm not going to put you on spot right now, but uh, what does it feel like when now you are studying more about the wine game? I think you're W set two, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So how has that changed since you really dive deeper into the wine space?
Yeah, and I brought one just in case. I didn't know we were getting into the wine during the podcast. But
Yeah.
yeah, man, I think the more you learn about it, the more you can appreciate what's in the glass. Like for a lot of people, it's just Chardonnay, right? Maybe you like
Hmm.
it, you don't like it. It doesn't really matter. And for me, the more I learn about it, you learn about where it grows and how it grows and why this one's from Oregon. Does that how's that different than ones from France or ones Chardonnay from Australia? And I think it deepens your appreciation for what you're drinking, and it kind of makes it a little bit more fun. It's like if you learn to speak Spanish, it's different between going to Spain when you know Spanish and going to Spain where you're just going as a tourist. So that's kind of what we're doing. I think is you know wines, you can kind of speak that language when you're tasting.
Facts. What are you sipping on right now? You said Chardonnay. What kind of Chardonnay is
Yes, this is my Son Noir. Has a whole thing that he does. People can see this called Oregon. It's a play on Bourgogne, which is like Burgundy-based wines, and this is his Chardonnay from the Willamette Valley, which is it's a beautiful wine. I picked it. I also picked it because I know you're a Texas guy, so
it? Yes, sir.
he started his career in Houston before
Okay.
going to New York. And everyone knows him in New York per se, the French Laundry. Like now he's like a celebrity, but his first gig was actually in Houston, which is cool. So I thought a little play on that for us
Appreciate it.
today.
Yeah, I'm sipping on. I feel like all y'all are from DC, so I need like a DC wine to go to. But I'm sipping on Antidoto right now.
Okay,
They put it in the fridge for a little bit, but something chill red for the summer. So not mad about
nice
it.
for sure.
How do you feel like um, really transcending from a researcher to a storyteller has not only affected you in your wine space, but also just your mental space?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know if I thought about it that much. I think they kind of play on each other. I think the research stuff makes me want to get deeper into the story. So like, that yes, it's you can learn about Andre Mack can learn his history, but I learned about the Willamette Valley and why is the Willamette Valley kind of like Burgundy in some ways, and like
Hmm.
you just go down rabbit holes when you're a researcher. And so as a storyteller, I also go down a lot of rabbit holes. But even starting to tell these stories makes me also think about what am I missing in the research? What are the personal parts of research that I can think about when I'm doing
Mm.
my work? So I think they play on each other a lot. And I think as a storyteller, I think you have to get past what's the first that first line, the first basic story, what's behind that story and how can you make something cool out of it?
That's awesome, man. So for someone that is a storyteller, when it comes to wine, and obviously you do a whole lot of research in your day to day, how do you avoid getting down that rabbit hole sometimes too? Because there's times where you get so deep into something, you almost get like, I don't want to say fearful, but you get hesitant to keep going down that hole. How do you manage that?
You know what? Sometimes I don't. I think when you're writing this, so like obviously the final story, the thing that you see in Psalm TV magazine or Vendor Project or places you see my writing, that story is, it has some restraint. You can actually understand what I'm doing. But I think sometimes I do let myself just go as far as I can go and see what's interesting about it. And then after that, I can go, okay, no one cares about soil types in this thing. It doesn't really matter. It matters to me. It's cool to know what the difference between a gravel soiled Chardonnay and a clay soiled Chardonnay look like, but maybe the reader doesn't care. And so I can start to pull back. But I think it is sometimes letting yourself go as far as your imagination will take you and then figuring out what pieces actually matter. And I think both of those, research and storytelling, I think you have to really think about it that way.
Yeah, I see that in everyday life too, with people trying to become more vulnerable. You also have
Yeah.
to be more curious with your researching and your wine storytelling. That way, you can better connect with who you're interviewing or what you're writing about.
Yeah, man, I think that's exactly right. I'd be curious, what you think about this. For me, I think wine is people as much as it is wine, and so I can talk all day about structure and we can get all nerdy about like the testable grapes and stuff like that. But to me, this is like the story of a guy that's trying to make something interesting. And to me, the story is the person. So I'm curious, is that kind of what gets you into podcasting is like the people versus like what you're drinking?
Yeah, no doubt. I was on like one of my now like I would say like a wine friend almost, but like these are really two cool dudes. Like 94 Pours,
Mm-hmm.
one of the episodes that I was on a few months ago. Like we connected about just everything in between wine, right? And I think wine allows people to kind of have that initial connection, but then when you dive deeper into like who they are, if you're interviewing or writing a story about somebody, you're gonna want to know about what prompted them to create this wine or create this brand.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's exactly right, and I think that's hopefully people see in the stuff that I'm writing about, and even if you see the stuff on Instagram, like the first two paragraphs are like the people and where they came from and why did they call it this, and like that stuff is
Right.
just really interesting to me.
Yeah, you definitely want to find out like the why first and the who before the what. So what struggles have you faced with, kind of starting your own um, storytelling channel and source?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge I'm starting to get around it now, and hopefully I'll find a way to help other people is I think the access can be a challenge for a lot of people.
Mm,
At least for me, I'll say I didn't start in a restaurant, I didn't start in a winery. I still haven't. I've been in wineries. I still haven't been in restaurants and stuff. And so for me, I want to tell stories about people, but I have to find the people, right? So
yeah.
I think some of the challenges were just trying to get in front of people and say, like, I know I don't, when I first started, I didn't have any followers in wine. I didn't have any publications. Like, pretty much no one knew me, so I was really trying to like beat the pavement and network and try to find organizations I could reach out to. And so, I think wine is one of those things where like when you're once you get in the community, it's really easy because everybody's kind of knowing each other, and if you're affiliated with something, people can kind of know you, and that's certifications help with that too. To
Mm,
say you're a certified specialist in wine or you're an American wine expert, like those things help. But I think in the beginning it can be tough to like break into the community. It's almost like going to Thanksgiving. and you're, with your significant other for the first time, and you don't know their family, so the family knows each other, but you don't know them, they don't know you. It can be kind of awkward getting in there.
Ooh, yeah, that's a good point, especially for people who are maybe in a different industry, right? They didn't really grow up
Yeah.
or build their career into wine. It can definitely be a bigger challenge. I can agree with that.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll get better at that. I don't think we have to. I think it's just a thing that people are doing for now. I think we can get better at
Good point for sure. Especially with COVID, like post COVID, I believe that's been a bigger jump with people finding that secondary hobby, right?
it.
Of,
Yep.
whether it's their passion or maybe more of their purpose. I think it's been much more accessible to like branch off into a new industry or new sector.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, I think wine is for everybody. I think there's lots of things you can do in wine, and I think it's cool. Podcasting, like yours, or storytelling or writing. I think there's a lot of space for people. So hopefully everybody finds one.
Now, you mentioned on your Instagram profile, you really like to use wine to not only tell the stories, but really empower social justice. You mentioned earlier about the tragic murder of George Floyd. We know about the tragic murder of Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and unfortunately, there's so many names that um, you can add to that list. Like, how have you been able to field responses from your stories that are empowering, minority groups today?
Yeah, man, I love that question, and shout out to you for doing your homework on that, because I when I first started the page, that was one of the first things I put down there, and I'd forgotten that it was on there. But yeah, I mean, to me, all the people you named, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, Sandra Blake, George Floyd. I mean, we could
Mm-hmm.
we could spend the podcast naming all the names, but they're humans as much as they're like stories, right? This is somebody's. George Floyd had children, and Breonna Taylor, we knew she was in a relationship because he was a part of that whole story, and like these people are people, and I think we lose that in these stories. It's a police versus an unarmed black man, an unarmed black woman, and we don't think about like Breonna's more than that. She was someone that was trying to build her own career. She was even thinking about
She was
getting
an EMT
into
nurse,
like
I
the criminal
believe.
justice system, right? And so I think that's where we miss. And I think when people miss that, it's easy to say this was a person breaking the law. That's what happened to them. When they're so much more than that, they're humans. And so the same thing in wine. I think these are not just like random winemakers. These are people that have a story to tell. We talked a little bit about my son Noir and Andre Mack, but
Mm-hmm.
I work with Ebony Wine and Spirits, and Camellia has this whole thing about family and culture and vibe. And the McBride sisters, I know we all know their story. They have this whole story about how they connected, and being from different places, and the athletes and D Wade Sellers, like everybody, all these things are people for me that have really interesting, cool stories. So many Hispanic-owned winemakers that I've talked to. I was just talking with a guy, Chris from Say Soles, which has this whole like heritage around Mexican American heritage, and his whole brand is around Aztec culture and history. And so there's to me, those are the ways that we'll start to come closer together as people. Like, it's not just any Mexican American. It's Chris, who has a home in Lodi, California, and is like trying to build something for his family. And it's those stories to me, I think, will get us to a place where we can understand each other and not think about who they are based on our own biases and stereotypes.
I love that answer because I mean, it's so hard. It's really hard to put yourself in a position of other people's backgrounds, right? Everyone has their own unique
Yeah.
story, and for you to tell those wine stories about diversity, you're definitely someone that I can, uh, relate to, look up to, as far as you trying to visualize that and tell that story for millions of people to read.
Yeah, man, I appreciate that, and hopefully more people can tell. I love this podcast already. I've seen all your episodes, and I think that's part of it, right? How can we tell these stories of people that are in the wine trade? And I got to know Will because he and I are in Hugh Society together, from an episode of yours, and Janelle from
Yeah.
Burgers and Wine, and I worked on Black History Month, to have Black her the story month that she does, and all that stuff. The more we can get all of that stuff, your podcast, her thing, all the stuff that he's working on, I think the better off we're going to be, in general, not just in wine.
Sure, I appreciate it, man. It definitely feels like I'm a part of the DC culture. Like I said, even though I'm in Dallas, like just the fact that we can communicate via, platforms and just have those
Yeah.
engaging conversations, it definitely means a lot. Um,
Yeah, you have to make your way out here one day.
Yeah, I've already looked at flights, so hopefully, by the end of the year or early next year, I can head out to Northern Virginia and we can all link up.
Love it. Let me know.
Yes, sir. A couple questions before we go. Where can people find
Sure.
your stories at?
Yeah. So I'm trying to I'm trying to find a place because I don't have a website, but you can definitely find me on Instagram at Untoldwinestores. There's a link tree in there with all my stories.
Okay.
I do think if I start getting too many stories and the list gets too long, maybe I'll get a website to put it on. But I'm at the Vintner Project. I'll be on Uncorked and Cultured. I'm actually finishing that piece this week, and I'm starting to work with them regularly, so I'll be there a lot. I had a piece in Psalm TV as well, so Psalm TV's online magazine was a piece there. But I would say Uncorked and Cultured will probably be where you can find me the most.
Awesome. And then my last question for you: who has been your biggest influence in your writing and in wine?
Oh man, that's a great question. My biggest influence, to be honest, I think there's a few, and I think for a few different reasons. I think Andre Mack, I definitely look up to a lot as a winemaker who came. He was someone that didn't start in restaurants. He was in business and like made this journey into wine and became who he is today. Chassie Cooper, I want to shout out. She's a wine writer out of Chicago, and I look up to her a lot and have read almost everything that she's ever written. And I think her style is kind of similar to mine. I think it's really getting to the core story and the culture of things. And so I would put her on the list. I think those are maybe the top two, but I think I could go on for days for my inspirations. I think there's a lot of cool people. Dylan Proctor, who was like from the Psalm documentary, was one of the first Black men in wine that I saw, and so that had a big impact on me. I draw inspiration from a lot of places.
That's real, man. Oh, I definitely appreciate the chat. We're continuing to support, other wine creatives, not just winemakers. So to see someone like you who's really, pushing out more content to help promote diversity and social justice in 2022 and beyond, it definitely means a lot. So y'all continue to support him, and we're looking forward to reading more of your stories.
Yeah, man. Appreciate it. Cheers.
Cheers. Yes, sir.